Gotcha.
So, first off, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for taking the time to come hang out.
Of course. My backstory, well, I started with film publicity. It was my first entry into the media landscape. I worked 2 different studios for a bit, and then I got a call to say, like, do you want to work on these magazines? Do you want to do like the entertainment booking for them, which was almost like the reverse of what I was doing, because I was pitching. And it was someone who it was a editor that I was pitching, and I love magazines. I've always loved magazines, and I have a huge collection. I'm gonna die with like a huge collection of them, and I was very excited about the opportunity, and it was all the magazines that I read anyway. It was all the editors and all the photographers that even if I didn't know their names, I knew what their work was. So, I was just thrust into it. I was just like, when I was, it wasn't a job where like I wasn't an assistant. I was like, they needed someone to be like all hands on deck. So the person was moving to the LA office, so I was just kind of taking over in New York with someone else, and it was kind of the best way, just to be thrown into like being like, here, get on the phone with Stephen Gann, get on the phone with Katie Graham, like you just do it.
And how long ago was that?
This was like 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. And was that the same company you're with now?
Same company, yeah.
Nice, which is Starworks.
Which is Starworks, yes.
Given that you've been in magazines for, a hot minute or two, what are some of the key differences you've noticed over time as digital's kind of come into play in a larger way?
There was a lot of resistance to digital, I think, at first, and kind of doing original content for digital, because people were just, well, it's just a website. And now the truth is, I realize that people are not necessarily even looking at the magazines, but they'll see all the content when it comes on the brands, or the magazine's Instagram or the magazine's website. Like, there's things that actually have come out that have been out for a month, and then as soon as we promote it online, people are like, oh, I love this story, and like they had never seen it before. So I think that there's definitely just a more embracing of, and we've been able to get bigger budgets, and across all the board, just like realizing you can't just rely on the print, and the digital has to complement it. I think people are just being smarter about that.
Do you find that people have pulled back in any sort of a way with print as a result of those evolutions, or do you think that it just further supports it?
I think that,
because you're talking about bigger budgets, so that sounds more like an improvement than anything.
yeah, I think that brand magazines have realized that the digital space is more important than, or not more important, but could be just as important when it's viewed as a complement with the print. I think that these types of magazines will always love the print. They'll always love the big glossy. But I think that they have just like strengthened their teams and decided to actually build teams that are just doing online versus having a print person who could do both.
Crossover both.
Yeah.
We're living in a time where there's a unique sort of simultaneous existence of multiple trends in terms of who occupies those spaces. So sometimes it is talent, sometimes it's a model, sometimes it's a particularly unique person that will work as a model even though they're not necessarily a traditional celebrity and all of that fun stuff. So how do you think that kind of pie ratio has evolved? I think
that's exactly the breakdown. Like, but no one's just a model usually with our castings anymore. I think everyone wants a model that does something else. So I think that in terms of the celebrity into the fashion space, what is not new. I mean, but that was new for Starworks at the time when they launched their company, 14 years before my time. So that was something that was kind of a world that I inherited, and that was sort of the language that I understood when. We weren't just, when I was booking celebrities for these types of magazines that formerly only put models on the cover.
As far as, a number of different kind of new evolutions in our business, one of my favorite things to talk about is, of course, identity politics. And that's because I think one of the most common questions that a lot of brands have been facing is how to bridge the gap between themselves and, say, millennials and even Gen Z, who are, growing portions of that consumer demographic, because they don't really seem to be identifying in the antiquated categorical way that even you and I would, regardless of how open-minded one is, just because culturally that's sort of how they identify differently. And so I was curious as to whether or not you thought that was a relevant consideration when making some of these decisions as well.
I think for sure. I think that what we've seen is on every call we've had with every client, we ask, how important is diversity to you? How important is putting a trans person in this? How important is is just basically finding out. But I think that every brand has their temperature, and I think that it's not quite all. I think that there's still a lot of conservative brands, and I think there's a lot of brands that are still not responding to the culture in the way that they should. But I think that on the flip side is there's plenty of brands that are, and it's exciting and inspiring to kind of. And I think that's sort of what the main trend was. I mean, having worked as I've worked where I have for a period of time, is seeing that it used to just be one celebrity, one big celebrity that represents all. And I think that seeing like kind of the popularity of this more ensemble cast and having a mix of people has been the real shift to me, because I think brands are realizing that you can't just have one person, not one person speaks to all these people. And I think that's definitely like the trend of, of millennial culture, and seeing and having them respond to different things. And it's not just one person. I think brands really want to have the talent engaged with the brand, and having them, having just a more holistic approach to it, which I think feels less like I just showed up for a photo shoot and got paid X dollars.
So, I mean, in the end, do you think it's safe to say that regardless of the series of changes this industry has seen and the great state of flux that we're in for the, exciting and the questionable, fundamentally that process is quite primal and in a way will and has always been the same?
Yeah, I think that there'll always be that girl of the season. They'll always have that feeling of someone that like people are just super excited about and want to feature in everything. I think that we've seen that, and I feel like almost now it's even more amplified. People are more, what I've noticed really the trend is that people, it's like as soon as someone does this one thing, that people are already after them. And it's like, in a way, there's not even like that moment where they can go from like an inside picture to like a multiple spread. It's like now like an inside picture and then it's a cover. And, or it's like you're the leader of that brand or that campaign. There's not really that like nuance of that period where they're just sort of floating around and like you're still trying to figure out and you're waiting. It's like people just jump on it a lot quicker because everyone else is. So I think there's a lot of, I think that the brands and the magazines are responding to the culture that we live in.
100%, of course.
The idea of model as celebrity was not a new concept, but I think it was adapted towards, kind of the very millennial focused audience. But I don't know. I think that may change. So I think that we'll have to see what goes on.
Definitely. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.